I have actually been hypnotised before. And so I can really remember that experience. It was a willingness, like I was very excited to experience this thing. So I was like, oh, let's do this. So I was obviously very receptive to it as well. And I remember just sitting there and being in this place where it was almost like I had a piece of glass right in front of me, and I was here and I could see through it on the other side, and I could hear everything that was being told to me, and I knew I didn't have to do it, but for some reason I wanted to do it. And I think a lot of this, especially everything that's gone on in the world at the moment, I think a lot of it comes down to trust, really, and to be able to accept and put yourself into that place of vulnerability, not even in like a hypnotherapy state. And I think that just kind of tunnel visions and echoes it from oh, sorry, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I feel like hypnotherapy and the trust within that kind of echoes life as a general, really, and how we move forward is how willing we are to step into the trust of what's going on around us. I think a lot of time people tend to go into survival mode, especially at the moment. Everyone's trying to protect themselves, and you're not, you're just here. But I've realized recently, being in that place is just a dead end. You can't go anywhere with it. And you really need to be able to step into the vulnerability, into the trust, to be able to break through that glass ceiling. And I really believe that hypnotherapy is almost like a fast track route to it, because in that moment, it really just lets you know that it exists and it's a possibility. And I think we're all living in a place of not really understanding the possibilities that are there for us.
I think you're right. I think that I mean, there's a few. These are all big mysteries, but I would say that the conscious mind, by definition, is highly linguistic, meaning it's language
Hmm.
based, and language is very much in the business of trying to accurately describe what's going on. And because of
Mm.
that, it tends to be feel very limited. Meaning, we use language to say this is what's going. We're doing a podcast right now. We use it to describe precisely what's going on. There's not much
Yeah.
room for, while the unconscious mind thinks in pictures. I do something called movie therapy because the unconscious mind thinks in pictures, sounds, and sensation, which is much more magical, ambiguous, possible, and a bigger world, I would say. And that's
Yeah.
why it's the simple reason why people sometimes prefer to watch movies than read books, because it's more
Mm.
engaging. So, in some ways, repressing your unconscious mind is like living in a text. It's a sign to live in a. I'm going to live in a book when I could live in a movie, you know. And what I've
Yeah.
noticed to what you're saying is that people tend who've never experienced hypnosis tend to be fearful that somehow something crazy is going to happen. People who've been in hypnosis before know that they don't do that. They know that
Mm.
it's a manageable experience, that it's actually, I actually believe the hypnotic trance is a form of play. It's a play state
Mm.
where you explore this interior universe. So I guess my point is that it's not all, uh, it's not unlimited, and people who've had the experience seem to understand that it doesn't have to be scary. And even like I try to debunk the myths. So this classic myth that somehow it's mind control. I was in film and theater. I work in film and theater as well. And I'm like, if you want to see mind control, go to a play. Because in theater,
Mm.
so let me give you an example. So in hypnosis, I might say to people, let's go into trance if that's okay. Become very relaxed, and let's go into your past. Let's open the door and have you walk into your past and see what's there. That person has a lot of agency in that situation. In theater, and I've done plays, they tell you stand here, say this, make this facial expression, point your
Mm.
face towards the light. It's actually super controlled. That's mind control, in my view, in that the person is very controlled by those situations. Classic good hypnotherapy is just help is just guidance. You're helping
Mm.
people through doors, through situations in their life, and hopefully you are a good guide. It's a
Mm.
different game. The mind control myth happens because there are these demonstrations where you show that you're working with the triggers or the key programs that a person might have. and that's
Mhm.
real. That's not.
Yeah.
I mean, that is true. But
I
sorry, go
think it's
ahead.
the going into the subconscious of it that is all the scariest thing, really. Because, like you say, it's so
We're fight.
interesting that you, yeah, and it's so interesting the fact that you bring up like theatre and movies and everything, because it really is that it's a willingness. We all know what we're going in there for. We all know that we want to like go into a different place to experience this make believe thing to escape. But when it comes to hypnotherapy, it's your subconscious. And I think we do live in a world where a lot of people don't take the time to look within. A lot of people tend to just bandage things up and ignore it and not really pay attention to that. And this is like a quick route into like that place. And it's scary for people. I know that for me, it's going through therapy that I've gone through, having to go into these different places. It's horrible. It really is. But I'm a firm believer that things get worse before they get better. And also that I'm, I mean, I can't imagine going through this life and living without knowing myself that well, because then I'm going to be so controlled by all these external things. And I think a lot of people just let it happen. And in my experience, I know it is so much easier just to do that, to just go along with the wave that's set out in front of us, instead of having to go and delve into this deep, dark basement door of doom.
You're onto something here, because you know I actually think that we live in a culture that has a both a rational and an irrational fear of
Mm,
therapy. But
mm,
actually, some of it is for good reason. And let me explain. So the cliche of therapy that is largely maybe been created by movies is that it's a long, slow process. And so, but also this is the dominant model. You go to a therapist, and in 2 or 3 years, you might see some small changes. And
mm,
what hypnotherapists know, and I think there are other kind of therapists too that are aware of this, is change can happen very quickly. People,
mm,
you see in one session, sometimes people change dramatically if
yeah.
if you know what you're doing, if they know what they're doing. There's a really interesting study where they did MRI scans of people experiencing talk therapy, and what they showed was when people have a problem or they're suffering in life, their thinking tends to come out. There's a phenomenon called coming out of the fog. Coming out of the fog is, I think I have this problem. As I begin to find words to describe it, I'm coming out of the fog.
Mm,
So there's this second stage where, as you start to wrestle with your problems, you start to put them into words. And literally, they see in MRI scans that the problem moves to the linguistic center of the brain.
oh gosh,
It
so
actually
interesting.
kind of moves it. Okay, but here's the interesting part. So now you've moved it from the fog to the linguistic center, but the problem is not resolved. You're just aware, okay, I have this problem.
Mm,
You're aware of it now. So then there's an attempt of a third stage, which is to try to solve that problem. And what they discovered in this study was that if the problem is not resolved, like it doesn't go anywhere, it shunts back to the fog, meaning you don't get better. You don't really resolve them.
mm,
And what the study suggested was that there was an essential third stage. And the essential third stage would be catharsis. And catharsis could be sometimes can be emotional, meaning classically, one of the healing things you do in hypnotherapy, but any kind of therapy too, is that you bring things to the level of awareness, and then you might grieve them or laugh about them. I believe in laughing about them sometimes, because those are the cathartic states.
mm,
Crying is cathartic, laughing is cathartic. And when you do those things, you now go to the third stage. You essentially release the thing that is holding you back.
mm,
And you need that third stage. And if you don't get it, you are in this perpetual cycle that goes on in the classic 3 year dilemma of go see a therapist for 3 years and make
mm,
minor improvements. While if you move towards these cathartic approaches, you can make changes quicker, faster, and in fact in a real way.
mm.
So this is like a little known thing. I don't know why it's not a bigger deal, but I think it should be.
I think it is, because I think that catharsis, it's kind of almost the resolution of it, and it's almost kind of letting it go to a degree. And I think laughing in regards to like pain and stuff is very helpful, but you have to come to terms with that pain to then be able to laugh about it. um, and yeah, I mean, you just said a lot. I feel like my mind's blown a little bit because you just said lots of different things to me. And I feel like I've got a few different points on a few different things that you said. One of them that I thought was
Yeah,
quite interesting, you was talking about the conscious mind being mainly in with labels and like making sense of the things that we can see,
language.
whereas and the unconscious, the more pictures, etc. And then previously you kind of spoken about how we arrive at our sexuality, and that kind of got me thinking about the link between those two and the labels of people's sexualities and how they come about and how we grow into that as well. And I think there is obviously a lot of that is going on in the world at the moment. I just kind of thought, well, maybe if people are delving into that subconscious, it would probably be a more authentic understanding of who they are and who they want to be.
That's right. And I think that that one factor in trance work is that people are, I don't want to say, I don't want to exaggerate and say more truthful. I think people are more truthful in trance, but it's not
Mm,
100%. People can still lie in trance, but they are less inhibited. And this is why there's some interesting, this is why stage hypnosis shows are entertaining, because you're
mm,
looking at people who had a lot of their inhibition brought down, and they are more likely to do crazy things. That's why they
mm,
do, like, funny dances, or whatever you would see as a disinhibited person. So yes, hypnosis changes that aspect. But again, these things are all still, it's still us. It's
mm.
still, we haven't become somebody else.
Hello. Sorry, my run with technology has not been in my favour. I'm hoping it's going to get better.
Good.
So yeah, so this is I just think it's quite interesting. I'm sorry, I'm probably like just firing loads of random things off to you because the way my brain works sometimes
It's
is
okay.
just
That's a good.
mysterious.
Yeah, it's okay.
um,
So what was your last? I'm trying to remember. Your last question was
so I just thought it was interesting because you were speaking previously about how we arrive at our sexuality, and maybe I'm not completely understanding what you mean by that. So,
so yeah. So this is I was just part of a study, a really interesting study, so preliminary, called the Prague experiment, which took place in, of course, in Prague. So one thing a lot of people don't know, and I'm making a movie about it because it's so interesting, is that you can hypnotize people, some people, not everybody, but a lot of people, I would say a good proportion, to without being touched, without even, and even without it being having any sexual component. You can hypnotize people to have orgasms, which is kind of crazy. And I would describe the process also as breaks the sexual rules. So, for example, people often need some kind of stimulation or to have a sexual experience to have orgasm. Well, no, they can just go into trance and they can have an orgasm. I've demonstrated. I have a thing on YouTube called the 1 minute orgasm, where a woman is able to go from zero to orgasm in less than a minute.
what would you say are the benefits of that? Because you know what it makes me think of a little bit. It makes me think about the laugh therapy, like laughter and that sexual climax. I feel there's a similarity there.
Right. Well, we started a workshop. So the group that is sort of involved with the film started an ongoing workshop to understand this, because when we first started seeing it, meaning if you just did a kind of session with somebody, the physical benefit seemed to be dramatic in that people seem to, not only did they feel good, because you obviously feel good when you have that
Mm,
experience, but their complexions improved, their self-confidence improved,
mm,
they just had that look. The comparison would be if somebody had been kind of, when somebody goes through life and they suddenly meet a lover and they are suddenly having, like, let's say, meaningful sexual bonding, and everyone's like, hey, what happened to you? You're looking
mm,
good. That was the look. and we called it the bloom. And it
Mm.
seemed like you could create this effect quite technically, meaning you just had to have the ingredients, the proper consent, and it would happen. So so anyways, to make a long story short, I was part of a study that took place with the Czech National Institute of Mental Health, where we took 10 people who had volunteered for the study, and of them we found like the best hypnotic subjects. So about half of them were great hypnotic subjects, the other half were not so good. And we hypnotized the people that were good hypnotic subjects. We tried on everyone in a sense to have hypnotic orgasms, and we would ask them to report. I mean, we could look at them and say like, that person's having an orgasm. They were fully clothed, they were not being touched, they're just lying on a bed fully clothed, not being touched, just being talked to in effect. And then blood tests were done on those people. And what we found out, I think, is mind blowing. I'm part of the study, so I'm very biased, but it is mind blowing, in my opinion. That so the people that did actually have orgasms uh, had the presence of a hormone that would only indicate uh, that they had had true orgasms. So they know that there is science to show that when you actually have an orgasm, that is when you have this hormone, prolactin. Prolactin is a hormone. It has two really interesting aspects. One, it is very high in breastfeeding mothers. So mothers that are breastfeeding are high in prolactin. So there's some suggestion that it's a kind of bonding, lovey-dovey hormone,
Mm.
right? Which would make sense.
Yeah.
Um, and again, so what we found out, it's only present, and it was only present in people that really had hypnotic orgasms. And it was 100%. There was no ambiguity. There was no case where somebody had an orgasm and they didn't have prolactin, or somebody did not have an orgasm and they did have
Okay.
prolactin. It was
Mm.
there was no ambiguity. The other thing that I found out doing research on it, because I just became very interested in this area, is that there's a really weird thing a lot of people don't know. So, so you asked, and this is I'm gradually coming to the answer. You said, how do we arrive at our sexual programs?
Mm.
I think the conventional view is that somehow as we mature, it's actually our sex organs that tell us what to believe. Like as we develop sexual feelings, our sex organs program us to have sex. That's also what you were taught in, roughly speaking, in grade school sex education. You develop sex organs and then you start thinking about sex.
Mm.
But we actually know that's not true. People might have sexual feelings all throughout their lives. I was shocked to learn this. I think they become particularly intense in adolescence. And so I don't know how to say this properly, but this is mind blowing to me. There's research to show that and it's a great equalizer too, men and women experience nighttime erections all throughout their lives. So men and women, so men, their penises, generally women with the clitorises, experience erections all throughout their lives when they are in REM state dreaming.
Hmm. That's interesting.
So it is interesting. Now, let me explain why it's interesting too. When you hypnotize people, I did the TEDx I did. I've done a couple, but there's one that just blew up like crazy. It has 12 million views. It's called "Is Hypnosis Fake?" And
Mm.
it's a very controversial TEDx. It shouldn't be controversial, but it is. In it, I demonstrate something. I demonstrate when you put people into trance, their eyelids flicker, their eyes flicker, and their eyes move exactly like a person who's in REM state sleep. And that's the big deal of this talk, that there's a connection between REM state dreaming and hypnosis. And
Mm.
this explains why hypnosis might be so powerful, which is if you create the right trance, the person is kind of in a waking dream, and that waking dream can be managed. We can manage the waking dream. That's what hypnotherapy is. We're managing the waking dream. So it is little known. So what is interesting is it is likely that in our dreams,
Mm.
now not all nighttime erections are sexual. and a lot of them are not. They're just something that happens to the body. But it stands to reason that basically, as you go through life at night, without you knowing it, without you having any agency, you are programming yourself. And you may program yourself by things that you saw. So generally, we often dream about very, powerful experiences. So you see things like, "Ooh, what was that?" Or "That person's very beautiful," or "That person is sexy," or whatever it is. So that would explain why then at night you dream and you sort of integrate it into your sexuality. Or I find, and also tragically, it explains why sexual interference might affect people. Because if somebody interferes, I'm talking about people, unfortunately, that were either molested or
Mm.
interfered with, that they would then, without their control, dream about those experiences, which is they're sort of trying to make sense of them, and they
Mm.
somehow place them within their internal sexual programming.
Mm.
Now, the point of this, but here's a really weird part. There is a hormone that is present only in REM state dreaming that is active in the programming of sexual nature. It's prolactin.
Oh,
It's
oh.
Now, isn't that crazy? Now let me explain why this is intriguing. This is intriguing. So at night, throughout your entire life, as you dream, you are sexually defined by your experiences. But
Mm.
again, you can't go into your dreams and go, I would like to have this kind of sexual experience. You can't do that. It's, you can maybe, lucid dreamers maybe can, but generally you have no control. But in hypnosis, where we can recreate this kind of waking dream state, not
Mm.
only that, we can create the high prolactin hypnotic orgasm state, which results in, there's no science, but it's obvious to me that this is true. It results in the potential to change programs.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Mm.
have done this. I've demonstrated that you can hypnotize people to have a hypnotic orgasm about a certain thing. If you had them have a hypnotic orgasm about like tomatoes, they will start liking tomatoes more.
Yes.
And also not exaggerating.
And through that, that kind of puts people in more of a state in which they're able to redirect certain thoughts and feelings and experiences. And it makes sense because, like, if you're having a really good feeling about something and you connect it to something else, you're going to naturally remember that and connect to that a little bit more. Um,
Exactly.
so what I was going
Exactly.
to actually say is that the benefits of this. So I guess it's sitting similar to the law of therapy. It's having a more, like, a stronger ability to be able to divert from negativity or trauma or issues or kind of problem solving those things that maybe crop up in our subconscious that we might not necessarily be as equipped to do in a day-to-day basis.
I would summarize what you just said by agency, but just again, you having some control
Agency.
over your own sexuality, which is yours. You should have control over it. It's and you know, how I got thinking about this, I should explain. A lot of this has been influenced by clients. So I had a client who, and this is not uncommon. So sexual dysfunction is very common in most long-term relationships, which is interesting. I think
Mm.
in America they think around 55% of marriages are sexual dysfunctional, and I think what that means is that they the couple doesn't really like having sex with each other. That's what it
Oh,
means,
that's a
and
shame.
so that's bad. Yeah, that's bad. And the reason often is because of, in my view, inflexibility of programming. So let me give you an example. I had a
Mm.
client come to me, and this is not unusual. So men are more likely in heterosexual situations to be fetishistic. There's some mystery as to why that is, but they are. So, for example, this guy comes to me and he essentially has a foot fetish. His wife understands that, and but they reach a point in their relationship and is accepting to a certain extent where he can only be aroused by sort of foot oriented sexuality. That's his program. Now, what's interesting about that, and this is leading towards a tragic situation, because she feels like you desire my feet, which is also, you're also responding to an ancient program that maybe has nothing to do with me,
Yeah, of
but you
course.
don't want me. But he says,
Mm.
so I asked him, well, do you love your wife? Yes, I do. I love my wife. Do you think your wife is beautiful and do you desire her? Yes, intellectually I do. But when I become sexually aroused, I revert to a deeper program, which is the foot fetish.
Mm.
This kind of thing results in divorce.
Mm.
I'm not saying in every case, but in many cases, because the couple eventually reaches an impasse. It can be around any other. It's usually one person is over here and the other person is over there, and they can't
Mm.
meet.
You're kind of bridging that gap, really.
Right, and they go to, again, the classic therapeutic model where 3 years of talking, thinking that will help, but really all what talk therapy does, remember back to our shunting conversation, is that it raises it to the level of awareness. Okay, I'm aware that we're sexually dysfunctional. Great. That makes me feel bad, but there's no catharsis because I never moved to action that will make a change.
Mm.
In hypnosis, you can do this amazing thing. Deep trance creates states of high flexibility. So what I did with this guy, and this worked, is you go to the person. Do you love your wife? Yes. How does that feel? I've got this feeling in the center of my chest. My wife's an amazing person. We love each other. It's beautiful. Warm, strong feeling. When you become sexually aroused, what does it feel like? Okay, when I see women's feet, I get this heat or powerful emotional feeling as well, and my heart is beating, and but those are two separate feelings, right?
Mm.
When that person is in trance, you go, okay, let's move these feelings
Mm.
together.
Mm.
So that love for your wife and that feeling of sexual arousal, let's mix them together so that whenever you think about your wife,
Mm.
you feel this beautiful heat that tells you want to be close to her.
Mm. Kind of makes me feel, makes me think of habit linking almost. Like when you do one habit and you're told to, okay, well, connect that and put that onto one of these other habits. So you connect that together and do that. So yeah, that's a very, feels like it'll be very effective.
Again, this is not, it's not within convention. It's not, if
Mm.
if you go to a sex therapist, as I understand, or this kind of thing, they will want you to talk about it for 3 years. Well, I think that the answer is more something like these catharsis based or action based approaches are better.